Brian, a huge welcome to the Lead on Purpose podcast.
James, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, I'm so excited about this. So for a long time, and I'm sure the listener's going to probably side with me here, we've thought about questions. Questions are so important. It's all about the questions. When we look at books, a large proportion of books, the title of them are questions, but actually you have rethought things, you've flip reversed it, you've researched it, you've done the study, and actually we're going to talk about answer intelligence, AQ, today. So Brian, just to get started, what is answer intelligence?
So I define answer intelligence, AQ, as the ability to provide elevated answers to important questions. So it's a framework that incorporates questions, but I call it answer intelligence because the new component is really the focus on answers, and that's where the majority of my intellectual contributions are focused.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. And let's take, so the listener that's listening right now going, okay, I focus lots on questions, but now I'm going to be open to shifting over to this answer intelligence. Where might they start to apply it in their life?
Well, I think answer intelligence is applied to any important conversation. That's a good starting point. So if you're in sales, you're going to field important questions, on a daily basis. Why should I buy from you? What is your product? How do we work with you? And is your ability to provide answers to those questions will determine if you close the deal or not. In leadership, you can ask yourself basic questions of leadership. Why am I a leader? What is leadership? How do I lead? And you provide these answers, which, we're going to talk about. But it's any area where you want to influence others and you want more effective answers is a good area to start.
I love it. And it's interesting because a lot of leaders talk about, how to win friends and influence people and that as a framework. But what I see, what you've done is so much more in depth in terms of the research. And you've been rolling this out. You've been rolling this out around the world. In fact, we just spoke before we hit record. You've got a partner here in New Zealand, which is incredibly exciting. So I know that the listeners want to dive in and get the meaty stuff here, but who, what, when, why, how, that's kind of what when I grew up in the British school system in Northern Ireland, that's kind of what we focused on, right? Like ask those questions. But tell me why we should be thinking a little bit deeper and longer than that.
Yeah. So think of it this way, like if you're exercising and you go to the gym, you want to exercise your upper body. You want to exercise your lower body also? Yes. It's sort of like this idea that balance is important. So if we're focusing on questions, it's great to understand the 6WH questions and formulating great questions, but we should try to understand the type of answers that are appropriate for each question. So for example, let's say we have leaders listening, and it's important to think about leadership and define it for yourself. So the question, what is leadership, can be answered with a concept and or a metaphor. So briefly as a concept, I'll just keep it really brief. The concept leadership to me is inspiring others and holding them accountable. And leadership is like two ropes. When the ropes are separate, they're strong. When the ropes are braided together, they're stronger. That's how I'm going to lead. Each meeting, I'm going to try to inspire and hold you accountable. So what I've demonstrated there is, yes, we need to know the questions to ask. In this case, what is leadership to reflect upon as a leader? But it's our ability to understand the particular answers that map to that question, help us gain knowledge, understanding, and self-awareness. And then when we understand those answers for ourselves, we can use those and share those with others. But it's simply saying there's two sides of the equation. There's the question side and the answer side. You need to understand both to be an effective communicator.
It's funny because as soon as you mentioned the two strands of the rope, and then instantly it just clicked for me. I was like, yeah, I can see it. I can feel it. It just makes sense. So what actually led you down this track? What was the moment in your life where like, I want to study that. I want to go deep on that?
Yeah, I think it was sort of a unfolding process over time, and I didn't realize I wanted to study it at first. But, someone said once that in research, you tend to research things you're not good at. And I always felt like I wasn't as an effective communicator as I wanted to be. I think a lot of us experience this. We have something to say. We feel like, we can share information, but we're not quite influencing the way we want to. And that's how I felt, for example, as a professor. I thought I really understood the material. I had all this knowledge and I wanted to share it with others and communicate with others. And it wasn't resonating the way I wanted to. So that was sort of the impetus, was really self-healing and correction of how can I become a better communicator. And that led me to the research, which we can talk about, if you like, with the top golf instructors in the world.
Let's do it. Let's learn what you learned from those instructors.
Yeah. So it was pretty fascinating. I did some research with the top golf instructors in the world, as rated by Golf Digest and Golf Magazine. And the basic idea was to understand what made them effective at providing answers. So we studied them for two reasons, and I'll pause. One, they were experts. They were in the top 50, top 100 Golf Digest, Golf Magazine lists that put them in the upper half of the 99th percentile in the world. There's 25,000 golf instructors in the US alone, and way more than that in the world. And this was a global list. That's one. But two, we studied them because they taught a wide range of students, from touring pros you see on TV to weekend warriors to your young son or daughter picking up the sticks for the first time. And that meant there was no restriction of range. So if they could communicate to all these different individuals, those that were less knowledgeable, less motivated, all these asymmetries, then that would work in other environments. When you're selling, the buyer is less knowledgeable than you are, or when you're leading, someone's less motivated. And so it represented a very unique sample that we've since found generalizes to almost any kind of important conversation in business or outside of business.
Incredible. And so what were the different parameters that you guys were measuring specifically with these instructors?
Yeah, it was, we didn't know if the nature of the design is grounded theory design, and you sort of come to the research with no real preconceived notions of what you'll find. And the way the research works is you sort of gather this evidence, you start to do sense making, and sort of the model or frameworks and the ideas that are going to sort of emerge from the research. And that's what we found. What we found are these people that were just unbelievable communicators and able to sort of organize how they did it. We came up with these high AQ practices or techniques they used. But let me give you an example of something that was amazing. One of the individuals I interviewed was on the Golf Digest 50 list, and he had taught half the people on the list. This is like the guru's guru.
I love it.
He's in the confirmatory portion of our research, and I'm talking to him, and he was unbelievable at metaphors. And I asked him, "Do you always get the metaphors right?" He said yes, and he wasn't bragging. I think this is how good he was. And then he said, "If I don't, I'll have another one at the ready." And that's sort of a lesson for the ability to communicate. That you have all the right answers. You're a student of these answers and connecting your experiences to answers, and you can just have that command of the material. It's like, to give you another example for your listeners, if someone here thinks they're a great leader, you're a great leader when you can communicate your leadership in all the 6 answer modes. You understand all the different concepts of leadership, servant leadership, and whatever the different frameworks are. Those. You understand the theory. You have stories of leadership. You have metaphors for what you think leadership is. You have procedures and actions of how you lead a meeting. You think about all these answers, but so you're a student of the answers, and that's what these golf instructors were. They were a student of answers. And to punctuate this, one of the golf instructors had a library of 3,500 books. I'm not suggesting everyone needs 3,500 books, but they studied everything about golf and anything related to golf. So they knew the physics of golf, psychology of golf, sports nutrition of golf. That is the type of command that the experts have, that those, that want to be, communicating about a particular topic at the highest levels, to have that level of commitment. So, that offers sort of one extreme for where you can go, but I'll stop there. I'm starting to digress.
No, it's brilliant. Thank you, Brian. And so it sounds like to have a high AQ, you've got to go deep on a subject matter. It's not about going a mile wide and an inch deep. It's about going like an inch wide and a mile deep. So they develop this AQ through a really deep understanding of a subject matter. Would that be right?
Yeah, it is, but it's also more complicated than that, in that, it is about depth, but when you're an expert, you often start to approach breadth as well. So for example, one of the golf instructors, shared an example or a story of a metaphor. So this particular golf instructor taught Cy Young award-winning pitchers in the United States baseball. So elite pitchers, and he was trying to compare balance in golf with balance in baseball. And he used a metaphor and basically said that the balance in golf and baseball are the same, and that the throw in baseball is similar to the swing in golf. And so you make this because of the dynamic balance and how balance shifts. The point is, this may not be the best example, but you're sort of able to understand other sports sort of horizontally. Or if you're talking to an executive, as a golf instructor, how to have metaphors that relate to the business world. So you wouldn't think at first like knowledge of business that's important for teaching golf. Imagine if you're a golf instructor and you're talking to a top CEO and you're talking about, you make some metaphors, you have references to procedures that relate to mergers and acquisitions. I mean, that seems totally far afield, but that's how you can, connect to someone and really get to them. And that's what these people could do. I got the sense talking to them, these golf instructors, that, these are like the perfect dinner guests. You could talk to them almost about anything horizontally. So it is sort of paradoxical. They're very deep into what they know, but they also are sort of, willing to make connections to a lot of different areas in life.
So that kind of inspires me to think a little bit about self-awareness. In your study and research, did you find that these individuals that had a high AQ, they had a high degree of self-awareness?
It's a good question. I think to some extent that might be a little bit outside of our scope, but I will say this. I think they thought in terms of the questions and answer types intuitively. We bottom up, we studied how they did it. So they did it naturally. It's sort of like an athlete in baseball, like Ted Williams. He was just a natural hitter in baseball, but he wasn't really a great coach because he wasn't really aware of how he did it. He just did it. So to some extent, it could have been just intuitive. We didn't really ask them. That wasn't part of the scope. But I will say for like the average person or the average communicator or anyone who's trying to improve, not at that level, and myself included, there's blind spots that we don't realize we're not providing certain answer types. So for example, like say sales reps, very focused on stories, but they might not realize other answers are important. Like metaphors can really unlock a client, or speak of our colleagues that use AQ in the aviation industry. Aviation industry, for example, heavily index on procedures. So if you're a German military pilot, let's say roughly, you got I don't remember the exacts, but it's something like a 500-page manual to be a German military fighter pilot. The German aviation industry has like 5x that. It's like a 2,500-page manual, something crazy. So, but the point is, every time something happens in airplanes, everything is, can we put a procedure around it? But procedures don't always save the day. Like, when Sully Sullivan landed the plane in the Hudson River in New York, it wasn't the procedures, it was other answer types in AQ terms. And frankly, even very subtle things like, mental models for ideas like calm and referencing stories during their life that kept them calm in the moment, that allowed them to win, to save lives, but it wasn't the procedure. So the point is, for each of us, we might over-index on something and not focus on something else. And that was sort of a learning.
And how do we catch ourselves when we are over-indexing? How do we become aware of that?
Yeah. Well, I think to start with, it's about realizing that there are 6 answer types. So if you don't know there's 6 answer types, then you're not going to know you're missing something. So that for me, when I practiced AQ, was a starting point. Like when I was a professor, been in and out of academia, I would teach classes like negotiations. And to be really succinct about this, I knew the theory, I had great stories, great metaphors, but I was falling short on the procedures and actions. I might talk about some technique for, integrative negotiating, and someone would say, ask, how do you do it? And I wasn't providing them the level of sophistication of answers on the procedure and action side that I did with the theory side, for example. So that was frustrating to people. I'll give you an example, like, how you have to, be aware of and focus on the answers. Like, let's imagine you're someone in sales that loves to tell stories. And I've had this experience where they're so convinced it's only stories that matter. Here's an example opposite of stories being important. Imagine you go to the convenience store and you want to buy a candy bar, a Mars candy bar. You ask the clerk, how do I find the Mars candy bar? And the answer you're looking for in AQ terms is a procedure, which is steps. You want the clerk to say, go down aisle 1, take a left, bottom shelf. You do not want the clerk to give you the history or the story of Mars candy bar. So it's awareness. If we know there are questions that map to certain answers, we can catch ourselves because we'll know that certain answers have appropriate answer responses. And the opposite of this would be, again, people just sort of rambling. Like we've all been in meetings where everyone just tells stories all the time. Like somehow that's the only answer we need. Let me just tell a story. It doesn't work that way.
And these answer types or these answer responses, I'm fascinated to find out what they are. So what are the 6 different answer types?
Yeah, so I'll go through them briefly. The what question is answered by a concept and metaphor. So, for example, trust. You could define trust and break it into a metaphor. So I talked to a consulting firm one time that defined trust as a client that does more than one type of business with us. That means they trust us. They only do one line of business, it's transactional. So you can disagree with the definition, but that's a definition. Then they had a metaphor. They said, we're the trusted advisor. We're the third card in the Rolodex behind the lawyer and the accountant, then us. So again, you can disagree, but wow, they have command. So that's the what question, concept and metaphor. The why question is answered by a story or a theory. So I'm not going to give you an example of this, but we all know what stories are, right? And stories have a moral of the story. And that sort of relates to the theory. The theory is cause and effect logic. For example, if employees are engaged, they're going to perform at a higher level. That could be a theory, cause and effect. And then you can have a story that shares that. Let me tell you a story about when our employees are engaged and it leads to higher performance, and you tell that story. So the story is, emotional, connecting to experiences. The theory is more objective. And you can even talk about like alternative hypotheses. What else is going to cause performance besides engagement? Maybe it's something else. And then you can also call a theory strategy, the strategy we're doing. Then you have the how question, which is answered with a procedure and an action. So to give you an example, a procedure could relate to the steps in a recipe. The 10 steps in baking a cake is a procedure. There's steps. Any given step really involves an action, like cracking an egg. So really what a procedure does is it catalogs and organizes the sequence of actions, but they're distinct. So you can tell me the procedure about how you lead a meeting, and then you can tell me a key action you do within that procedure. And actions really are unique or best practice. So, if I'm running a meeting, a best practice action could be an agenda slide. And I like to say an example of a unique action. If I have PowerPoint, I can hold up my keyboard, Control B, and the keyboard, if I am in full presentation mode in PowerPoint, will make the screen blank. Arguably, that's a unique action. Many people don't know about it. It's not absolutely unique, but I might do that if I want to give the floor to someone asking a question, or maybe I've deviated from the content on the slide. That's like a high quality action, arguably. So, anyways, those are the 6 answer types, and they map to different what, why, and how questions.
Incredible. And we're in, say, the last year or so, when we've been through quite uncertain and turbulent times, personally, professionally, nationally, like it's been everywhere. We've been dealing with uncertainty. Where have you seen this model really support an organization or support a community?
Yeah, I think there's a couple themes at a macro level. One is, I think going back to the pandemic, both themes relate to the pandemic, but the pandemic and also movements like Black Lives Matters, I think there's a general desire within society to, yes, have questions, but people are interested in answers. They want the solutions to these big problems, and probably nothing is more powerful to emphasize that in terms of the COVID vaccines. There were questions asked of our scientists. The scientists provided answers. Arguably, I mean, of course, it's a tragedy, but let's say those are important answers for our time. So you have similar need for other movements and desire for answers with movements like Black Lives Matter. So I think there's this idea the answers are important. Related to that, COVID and virtualization has put more of a premium on communication. So like when we're doing Zoom calls, like we're doing here, if you're doing a meeting with clients, the dynamics have changed, whether it's sales or a meeting. What do we have? We have shorter meetings. People's attention span is less. There's more of a premium on high quality communication. Like in sales, it used to be back in the day, you could take someone out to dinner, wine and dine them for 2 hours, and then you talk sales. Now, even if people moving back to the office, people don't want to meet you face to face all the time going out to dinner. It's about a quick Zoom call, and some sales calls, people report to me the clients have their cameras off. So the focus on quality answers and conversations matter more than ever. And with AQ, there's two things that it allows you to do. It allows for higher quality answers, but also more efficient answers. So you respond to the question being asked, you respond in the right way, more efficiently, you move faster through things. So that's the second thing that I think is the biggest application for AQ, is based on the virtualization of communication and the crisis of effectiveness. AQ is something that can help with organizations trying to be effective communicators in this environment.
Really powerful. And say from a parental standpoint, so some of the listeners will have kids. I certainly have a little boy. What are the benefits of equipping our youngsters and young leaders with the AQ model?
Yeah, I think if we just, take a basic approach towards this, leaning into what we already value. We value questions. We want our children to ask important questions about the world around them. But I think we also should expect and want them to develop compelling answers for those questions. And it's sort of that simple. And there's ways, we can help engage our students and move them along in different techniques. Like, for example, this is true for sales. It's also true for a child's understanding of something. Using AQ, of course, might depend on their exact age, per se. But, one idea is to truly understand something, you need to be able to communicate it in 6 ways. So if I'm like in a sales meeting or something, or in a leadership, I'm talking to my team, I give this story, very compelling. And then someone leans in and says, well, how do I use this in my next meeting? And you have no answer for it. It's not equally as compelling. There's a gap. So so we should educate our students, I think, our children, to develop 6 answers for something that's really important. And that is sort of a way to gauge the quality of our responses. So that's one thought. And the other thought is, as parents, you can use this to communicate with your children, provide them with compelling answers, engage them in conversations. Because we get tough questions as parents, like your young daughter or our young daughter might ask, implicitly or explicitly, what is beauty? That's a tough question, right? So you want to define it as a concept, and you have that perfect metaphor to put that in relief. So we're not talking, of course, about, any kind of objective external beauty, but, the more inner beauty. How can you frame that so the child increases in self-confidence and giving them the tools? So those are a couple thoughts.
I love it. Could we try that? Could we try ask a question and then you come at it with the 6 right. Answer types?
Yeah.
What's a topic you love? What's a topic that's dear to you?
Oh, geez. Well, I like sports and Premier League soccer, like coffee.
Okay.
Anything. Maybe we could work on this together. Or you can ask a question, but you can help me as we're going. Because one thing about AQ I like to say is I'm a coach, not a player. I try my best, but I'm making no attempt to say I'm the best communicator. I mean, maybe someone else can use these tools much more fluently than I can, and that's fine. Go ahead.
I love it. Let's look at sports. So what makes sport important?
Yeah, I think, so the question here, just to sort of deter what makes sport important. And one thing is with AQ, sometimes if they use the word what, that might be a what question, a how question, or why question. Like a young child may say how. You have to sort of map it to which level is it at. And so what makes sports important? So I think I'll answer that still as a what question. And I'll say, I'd probably say something along the lines of sports basically are a reflection of what we value in life. Okay. So that's a concept answer. And then I'll give you a quote. So quotes are related to concepts. They help us understand concepts. Okay. So I'll give you a quote of one of our AQ partners, Richard Hyam from London. And he told me this quote. He said, novices practice until they succeed once, right? Experts practice until they never fail. So now we think about that related to sports, and a micro, sports is a, reflection of life. It's something on stage. It has the drama, and we watch these athletes because they are aspiring towards, not failing. It's a different level of performance. And I think, someone that enjoys human capital and achieving your best, you look at these athletes and everything about them at the highest level is about, developing their skills. They have coaches, around every corner. And, those in the coaching business or training business, these elite athletes have everything, psychologists, all these teams. And it's sort of a microcosm for what high performance, is or could be in the real world. We see this parallel. And so that's sort of where my mind goes with this. And I'll pause there. That answer was sort of long-winded. Arguably I could have had a shorter answer, but sometimes when you do it on the cuff, it's more, difficult to come up with an answer. So I just provided just there a concept answer. I didn't, go to a metaphor yet, but let me pause there and see, what other question you have for me about sports and
yeah. My natural question then is I get excited by what you just told me. And then I go, okay, how can I embrace sport in my busy life?
Yeah, I think, embrace sport meaning being a participant or watching sports.
Yeah, I think a participant and engaging in sport and teamwork.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sort of related to this concept of reflection of life. I think so. How can you make this part of your life? I would say, I'd say is, in terms of, procedure or action, this may not be the best answer, but this is sort of my answer, how I sort of view sports. I like to think about sports the same time I'm thinking about other things I want to do in life. And I don't really separate the two. I do that for a lot of topics, but one of the things about sports is about interval training, and you do different intervals. Well, that's very consistent with high performance learning theory. And that's about doing things at different intervals and not always doing the same thing at one time. Like, for example, there's been, studies of sports. So if you are, sticking with baseball, you go to the park and you see children practicing baseball, like a bad way to teach children about baseball is for the fathers, sons, the mothers throwing to the children, to throw the ball at the same speed every time. We do that the same speed every time. So little Johnny or Susan hits the ball, right? And we say, oh, good job, right? But that's in a way sort of the wrong way to teach. What you want to do in learning theory is something called interleaving, where you want to basically vary the pitches, low pitch, fast pitch, curveball, and obviously lower, younger kids, the variance would be a little bit less. Maybe, high ball, low ball, slow, fast might be the way to go. But we learn through interleaving, and we don't learn and improve by just doing the same thing over and over again. So, as I'm reflecting on like interval training, it makes total sense as it relates to interleaving. So this is a reason to do interval training. As you're training in your fitness, you're doing short sprints, longer jogs, etc., and you change it up. So for me, this may not be the best answer, but in getting involved in sports, when I try to think about other aspects of my life and try to connect them together, and it gets me more excited about doing sports. And so that's my answer. It may not be the best answer, but that's my answer to that.
I love it. Thank you, Brandon. What I'm getting from this is that AQ, you can't install AQ and overnight bang away we go. It's a practice. It's a muscle that we develop. It's a model. I love that. And for the listener that's listening going, okay, AQ is very intriguing. I want to really, go deeper on it. What are the whys behind that? What are the benefits of having better AQ as a leader, as someone who wants to be a high performer or be world-class at what they do, and as somebody who wants to connect with humans, like better relationships, better health? What's the benefits?
Yeah, let me connect on that. Don't let me forget the connecting to other humans. I want to emphasize that. Just writing that down. Let me give you a couple benefits for leaders, but this, I'll say it frame in terms of leaders. A couple benefits. One is you can connect your experiences to answers. So you might be frustrated, you're not influencing people, or you're not being heard. If you use AQ, you can catalog the experiences you already have and put those into stories, into metaphors, into procedures. So that's a great starting point. Second, it gives you a vehicle to build upon your knowledge. So if being a leader is important to your brand, maybe read a couple Harvard Business Review articles on leadership. Start to understand the different concepts of leadership and choose, the concepts of leadership that connect to you, and be a student of leadership. The same goes for all 6 answer types. Second, you can learn a little bit more about AQ and things we haven't really covered, but there's high AQ practices or techniques, ways questions map to the answers. You can start to learn those and practice those. And those two things combined together, understanding the framework, cataloging answers, understanding techniques, will increase your confidence. So then when you get into live situations that are difficult, even like the questions you're asking me, James, I wasn't sure on all these, maybe not the best answers, but you're gonna be more confident, and then it's gonna, the third thing is gonna happen is you're gonna influence more. You're gonna win the deals. You're gonna have more gravitas in meetings, and those are the benefits. So that's what AQ does, is it gives you a framework to navigate important conversations, both questions and answers. And it'll make you, by the way, a better question asker. So like I may, ask you something, James, and say, I want to understand why do you want to move to this other company? Or why do you want to be a leader? And what I'm really looking for are story and theory answers. And I can even help you. I can say, can you tell me a story why you want to lead the organization? So I can use my knowledge of AQ to ask for the type of answers, and that's helpful. And I'll just say, in terms of connecting to humans, we all want to be understood. And I'll give you a straw person sort of idea for effective conversations. Imagine your next dinner conversation, or your last one that was with a friend. What are those conversations when they're good? Both sides speak about equally. Both sides ask and answer questions about equally. Both sides care about each other. So you take that now and transport that idea to leadership or sales or any conversation. That's what you want to do. It's not about, just providing all the answers or asking all the questions, doing both. This gives you tools to navigate those conversations. When you use AQ, the last thing I'll say is, within those conversations, they can become upward spirals. You start with one little conversation, and then you say a great metaphor, and then I ask a question. We're going up and up and up, and before you know it, that dinner just flies by, or that leadership meeting flies by, sales meeting flies by, and all we know is we just had a great conversation.
And I think, certainly for me, I can reflect on some recent conversations like that. where it was just an incredible experience. I felt we were equally contributing. There was a mutual trust and likability and respect. And also, yeah, there was a mixture of stories, metaphors, ideas, tactics. Yeah, it was, yeah, you ticked all those. That's very interesting. And I guess this is a very important question. I always like to ask this towards the end. But if we were to fast forward towards the end of your life and you knew it was your last day here on Earth, and someone very young, someone very near and dear in your life, it could be a grandchild or great-grandchild, they were to say, Brian, how do I lead my life on purpose? What advice would you have for them?
I think my advice to them would be, follow your passion. And you have to fan that passion, figure out what it is, and just follow that path. I think that's what leads to joy and happiness. It sounds sort of simple, but it's too easy to get distracted from what you really value. I think many persons, myself, I think, gosh, I wish I would have done some of these things earlier, the stuff I really love. So don't put it off and just follow your passion and do it well.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And as we think about you following your passion and sharing your research, your wisdom, and of course your book, I'm going to put a link for the listener right now in the show notes for Answer Intelligence, Raising Your IQ. So AQ, I'll be sure to put that in there. So please share with us, what is your passion? Where are you headed? What's the next 5-10 years look like for you?
That's a good question. My near-term goal is to spread AQ around the world. We have partners in 15 countries now, and I'm very interested in working with others that want to push the boundaries for what AQ is and how it's used in different conversations. So let's say the next 5 years or so, at least, are going to be focused on that. And beyond that, I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it's more of this, or it could be something else. But I welcome whatever way the journey may go.
I love it. Well, Brian, I'll make sure to put all the details of how people can get in touch with you, because there might be a listener listening right now that goes, you know what? I want to learn more. I want to learn how we can bring this into our organization, into our team, into our community. So I'll make sure that we do that. And you never know, there might be a very interesting collaboration or partnership that comes from that.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having me. You are a very generous host with excellent questions. So thank you so much.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on, Brian. I'm sure it'll not be the last time we speak, but thank you so much for taking the time to connect. Hey guys, if you enjoyed the content today, please smash that subscribe button below. And if you want to become part of my community, I've got an amazing free Facebook group. Please come and join us. The link is in the description below. And also, if you've got any questions about today's session, I'd love to know. Just comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you guys. Have the most amazing day.